School District Board of Education meeting for January 23rd, 2023. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Cerrone?
Here.
Ms. Doyle?
Here.
Mr. Gatewood?
Present.
Ms. Johnson?
Present.
Mr. Ploger?
Present.
Ms. Simelton?
Present.
Ms. Swanson? Present.
We'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 4.1 is an opportunity for the board to acknowledge and congratulate our Pride Award winners. I'd ask the board to please join me out front to congratulate this evening's recipients. And then 4.2 is fall athletic recognition, so we'll stay out as this is an opportunity for the board to recognize our fall student athletes as well.
Dominic is so ready. Sure you could. Good evening, everyone. We are going to start with our January Pride Recognition Program winners. Tonight, the Board of Education acknowledges Pride winners for the month of January 2023. Pride stands for proudly recognizing individuals demonstrating excellence. The Board of Education implemented this program in the fall of 2015 to recognize, promote, and celebrate the many contributions made by teachers and employees across our district. Teachers of the Month is sponsored by Allied First Bank. We recognize what our teachers do day in and day out for the continued growth and success for our students. Awardees, as your name is called, please come forward to be congratulated by the board and Dr. Sparlin. And then stay here and we'll do a quick photo. Congratulations to the following teachers for having been recognized as the January Teachers of the Month. Katie Blue, grade 4, Boulder Hill Elementary. Mike Linden, science teacher, Benarsic Junior High. Megan Mann, grade 2, Wheatlands Elementary. And Dana Miles, grade 1, Old Post Elementary. At this time, we'd like to invite up our building administrators to come join our awardees in the Board of Education for a photo. Yeah, get on up there. Probably gonna have to switch. That's a big group. Come on, guys, scoot over. Congratulations, teachers. Our next awardees this evening are our Employees of the Month, co-sponsored by Chick-fil-A and Huntington Learning Center. This award is given in honor of our employees who go above and beyond and are always willing to lend a hand. Awardees, as your name is called, please come forward to be congratulated and then stay there for the photo. Rob Manna, Building Engineer, Southbury Elementary. And Trisha Tunney, teaching assistant, LRC Computer, Grand Park. Got a fan club. Bring one over. Have fun. And we'll invite any Grand Park administrators to come forward, and we'll do another photo.
You're all for it? Okay. This is definitely memorable.
Congratulations, Trisha. We'd like to thank our generous district partners for this program, Allied First Bank, Chick-fil-A, Huntington Learning Center, and Culvers of Oswego for helping to make this program a success. And we'd like to thank all of those who take time to nominate individuals for this award. Okay, moving on to our students. The Board of Education is proud tonight to acknowledge the award-winning efforts of our students who participated in fall sports this school year and have received state recognition at the Illinois High School Association state championship competitions. Students at names called, please come forward to be congratulated by our board and superintendent, Dr. Sparlin. Chloe Diner, swimming and diving, third place, 200 yards. Next is Katie Grasick from swimming and diving, second place, 500-yard freestyle, and fifth place, 200-yard. Next is Katie Malm, swimming and diving, fifth place diving. And Parker Knoll, eighth place, cross country, all state. Okay, we're gonna, if there's any coaches here this evening, assistant coaches or building administrators that would like to join the athletes for this photo, we invite you up. Come on up, don't be shy. We'll take our photo, and then if you could hold, I think we have some parents eager for a photo too. Hang on one sec. Let's give our parents an opportunity. And one fine round of applause here. Congratulations, guys.
No, I didn't. No. I heard the response.
Yeah. You gotta make it, man.
It's always in my bag.
5.1, public comment. On behalf of the Board of Education, I'd like to thank the public for attending tonight's meeting. We value the feedback we receive from our residents and encourage everyone to take an active interest in their public school system. Residents interested in speaking to the board this evening are asked to have completed a comment card and presented it to the secretary to the board. When the secretary calls your name, I ask that you come to the microphone, state your name for the public record, and provide your feedback. Please note that comments are limited to 5 minutes per person and that no discussion of personnel matters or responses to questions are permitted. The board does not participate in discussion during public session, and please follow up to your questions or concerns will be addressed by administration through the contact information provided on the comment card. Thank you.
Michelle Trager.
Hi, Michelle Trager, 4 kids in the district. I just wanted to speak because you're going to be reviewing your SEL plan tonight, and I know it's like a 5-year plan, it's a work in progress. So there was a couple things on there that I kind of wanted to make sure you're considering when you're going through it. One of those things was the safety plan that is practiced and implemented, and I noticed one of the things on there was post-incident recovery. And I really want you to make sure that you are considering that when following through on that phase of the plan. I can tell you I have 2 students who are currently in 7th grade. They're at Plank. Last year at the end of their 6th grade year, there was the message everybody had to go into lockdown. This was not a drill. I heard afterwards my daughters were very scared, as were other students, fearing that there was an intruder. Teachers did what they were supposed to do. Students did what they were supposed to do based on what they had practiced, so that is the good news. The reason that this happened was that 2 girls were in a fight. I think one of them had a knife, and in an effort to keep more students from joining in the fray and to keep them from live streaming it, apparently the lockdown was issued. If you look at basic biology, you'll know that cortisol levels, when you believe your life is in danger possibly, skyrocket. And they don't come down for several hours. But in this instance, there was no kind of post-incident recovery, no processing, no anything afterwards, just like, okay, it's all clear, continue on about your day as normal. And it was interesting, one of my daughters asked me, oh, if we, meaning the students, had killed an intruder, if it was an intruder, what would happen? And I said, well, are you meaning, would you guys get in trouble? She said, no, but we just go on with our day as normal. And then I totally got where her question was coming from. I would also say, one of the things on the SEL plan is regarding Aaron's Law and regarding the presentations that Mutual Ground comes in to do, which are necessary. But I would also advise to consider, even in that, a little bit of processing afterwards. Again, one of my daughters had that for 7th grade health first semester, and it's a lot of kind of intense information. And it's like, okay, there's 41 minutes, you got to cram it in as much as you can, and here's the ways you could be assaulted, and here's how you can protect yourself, and the bell rings, and then you go to class, go to your next class. And again, there's no sort of processing after that. And we purport to be a trauma-informed district, so I would like to see that actually implemented throughout this SEL plan as it's being developed through I think it's 2026 on the plan. And I would just also share, my son is older now, but when he was in 3rd grade, so sometimes your behavioral, emotional management is overlapping with these other things. They had a drill in 3rd grade, and the students were to, gather closely up against the wall underneath coats. Well, when you have a student with sensory and neurodiversity issues, he was making some noises. Well, then he's got to have a consequence because he wasn't safe. Well, did you know it was a drill? Yes. Did anyone practice with him ahead of time? No. Okay, so you want to take away his recess thinking that's going to make it better next time. Let's role play, let's practice. And so I just want to make sure as we're going through that plan that we're taking all of our students into account with that. And I think the way it's laid out, certainly there's flexibility there for our students who do have those needs. And then, of course, I'm always going to remind you when we talk about SEL to consider that we have over 800 students in our districts with a fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, most of whom are undiagnosed. and 90% of whom have a coexisting mental health issue. So we want to make sure that we're able to serve those students because they're part of our general ed population and we often don't even know it. So thank you for listening to that, and thank you for considering those ideas when you're reviewing that plan tonight.
Mrs. Simulton, I know we don't respond, but I think it's very important to say that when it comes to being a trauma-informed district, we're at the very earlier stages of that. We aren't fully trauma-informed, so I just want to make sure that we understand that with that comes a very heavy label, and our administration can speak to it more, but I want to make sure we don't portray something that we're not. So just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Margaret Hartigan.
Good morning, or good afternoon, I'm sorry. I'm Margaret Hartigan. I'm a TA in the district. I'm also a taxpayer and a parent of several students in the district. $4,441,096.61. Are you going to listen now? Good evening, President Simulton and the district board members. You may recall that I was here in early December pleading that you raise the TA rates due to the hemorrhaging of funds in the district to cover empty positions. At that time, Superintendent Sparlin stated that he would give a report at this meeting regarding the amounts being spent on teachers subbing as TAs and for contracted TAs. I'm hopeful that will occur despite not being a specific agenda item. In the meantime, I've gone through the agendas available online and searched every bill listing from the fiscal year line by line. I've also done a comparison of what the district has spent on teachers subbing as TAs at just the school I'm assigned to, and can tell you that the figures will shock you. Since the start of the fiscal year, the district has paid $4,441,096.61 in contract services across the district. Let that sink in, $4,441,096.61. That includes $257,428.03 specifically on contract teacher assistance. The figure is likely higher, as over $379,000 includes contract services with no details as to what the expense is for, and an additional $113,724.04 lists the expenses from a company where the district contracts both TAs and teachers, but the invoices don't designate which amount is for which. Also, it's my understanding that the bulk of our DHH professional services contract expenses of $140,861.62 is for TAs who know and are skilled in sign language. In reality, we've likely spent more than $500,000 for contract TAs. Additionally, the district has spent over $686,000 on contract nurses and CNAs. The CNAs are typically in TA positions, but it's being billed to health services. That's another position in the same support personnel union as the TAs. Well over $1 million because of salaries of the supporting positions of TAs and nurses are not competitive, and we are unable to retain or attract personnel in these positions. I mentioned that I researched the amount of funds spent on teachers subbing as TAs at the school I'm assigned to. Well, during the first semester alone, OEA teachers have subbed in a TA position at my school for 1,020.58 hours. That does not include I believe it's 6 permanent subs that we have in the building that are assigned as TAs regularly. 1,020.58 hours costs our district in excess of $54,000. Just last week, 2 more SPED TAs at my school gave their notice. One is leaving to make $27 an hour with insurance as a TA elsewhere. The district will continue to lose valuable staff members, which will result in even more money being spent second semester on contract TAs if you don't act soon and raise the rates of these vital staff members. When I spoke last time, I reported that a contract TA at our school had refused to assist a student in the restroom. She had ultimately quit because the job was too much for her to handle. We now have a CNA assigned as a TA with a medically fragile student. This contract employee spends her day on her phone and only interacts with the student when and if medically necessary. This is not what TAs do. This is not what our job description says. There's another CNA working as a TA in another building who only interacts with her student when that student needs restroom assistance. Otherwise, she too sits on her phone all day. The rest of the district TAs have to work extra to cover for this slack. Why is the district allowing this? Why are you allowing the overpaid contract TAs to do little work while dumping more responsibility on those of us who are severely underpaid? It continues to lead to a hostile work environment. If you think this is hearsay and it's not really happening, you would be wrong. I've seen firsthand what's happening to my school. Not only that, but this morning alone, I was asked to sub as a one-on-one with a student in our building. The contract TA that was assigned to cover her for the day informed our PA that she didn't want to work with her. She claimed she couldn't handle all the walking, with no medical recognition, nothing on file. So they pulled me. Why are we at a point where these overpaid contract TAs can now pick and choose the duties they want or don't want? The students and teachers I normally work with had to suffer for the day because a contract person didn't want to work her assigned duties, and the district gave into that. I'm shocked and disappointed. On a side note, in reviewing the bill listings since the start of the fiscal year, I found that 88 companies we have contracted services for things like transportation, tutoring, psych services, TAs, nurses, OTs, speech paths, and more, there are 24 of those that have exceeded the $20,000 limit in which an RFP or a bid is required. Not one of those 24 companies were on the contract list provided by the Finance Department at the meeting on January 9th. Not one. The district spent $547,000 alone on one contract company, and they didn't appear on the list. It's not like that's even close to the $20,000 limit. It's 27 times the contract limit.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it very much.
In closing, I hope you
No, go ahead.
realize that we're all fighting to keep our jobs, and all you guys are doing is fighting to push us all away.
Thank you.
All right, item 6.1 is a presentation on social emotional learning by Dr. Kristen Paul, who is our Director of Social Emotional Learning. So, Dr. Paul, we welcome you to the board. The floor is yours.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Kristen Paul. I'm the Director of Social Emotional Learning for the district. I'm joined by Dr. Heather Kincaid, the Assistant Superintendent of Student Services and Staff Services. Tonight I'm going to give you an overview of our work since last year up until this calendar year with social emotional learning. I'll explain the indicators and the current success, as well as make connections to our student learning and finance, as well as talk about the future as well. You can see here on this document here, we have identified SEL curriculum for early childhood through 8th grade. We are in process of working with our high school teachers in developing an SEL implementation plan for the future. In addition, you'll see here that we are in the process with a K-12 SEL design committee comprised of administration and staff from all of our buildings, working on interventions and strategies tier 1 through 3 with a rollout for next year. In addition, we'll be continuing to work on our educational programming with signs of suicide. We, this year, for the first time, rolled that up into our 9th grade class, and we partner with an organization called A Alyssa's Mission, and they support us in that work. In addition, we are working on continuing to implement social emotional learning in our freshman seminar classes at both high schools, focusing on the first SEL standard, which has a lot to do with self-management, time management, organization. In addition, also, we are continuing to review our Illinois Youth Survey data and identify correlation to our curriculum and identify areas of need. That will continue. We do that every other year, and the Illinois Youth Survey will happen again in 2024. In addition, on this document, you will also see that we have several items that relate to restorative practices and the work that we have done in starting the plan to develop an implementation plan for restorative practices for next fiscal year. In addition, all the buildings taught expected behaviors using the behavioral matrix as their guide, and that was reviewed again after the winter break to reinforce expected behaviors. In addition, the Behavioral Design Committee is reviewing behavioral data and identifying trends and practices that they can be helping support our leaders and teachers in the classroom, and providing additional training in regards to safety and security to support our staff in regards to anything that might occur during the day, You can also see there's a reference to the district threat assessment team and some training that we're doing extensively to make sure that we can best support our staff and our students. Next year for the annual report, you will see a couple things highlighted from the SEL tiered interventions that I mentioned earlier. Again, the work of the K-12 SEL Design Committee. We'll roll that out next year with targeted professional development support our leaders and staff. In addition, we'll continue to review our mental health programming needs and identify areas for continual support. In addition, we'll continue with our restorative practice implementation plan and provide continual training for both our leaders and staff. And we'll also continue to provide safety training with post-crisis and unification support for all of our buildings, leaders, and students. Highlights as far as the connection to finance and some other areas, you can see social emotional learning does help students have an increase and staff sense of well-being and belonging. We know that social emotional learning creates protective factors for students and staff, which strengthens overall mental health, which yields greater result overall with satisfaction and belonging. In regards to student learning, just a couple things to share here that I provide weekly social emotional learning strategies for administration to use in their buildings, and also I help to model at one of our high schools teaching social emotional learning specifically on time management and study skills prior to students taking final exams at Oswego High School this past fall. As far as support for student learning, I am so excited to continue the work and student focus groups. That is a drive and a focus for our SEL Design Committee to gain the voices of our students. And I've been meeting with all different student groups throughout the district and really gathering their feedback to be able to identify some trends to best support their learning in the classroom. In addition, continue to provide professional development for all of our levels, leaders, and staff. We have several community partnerships from Alyssa's Mission, which I mentioned before. That's a long-standing partner for us, as well as partnering with an organization called Referral GPS, which has helped provide us with training with a risk to harm assessment screener called Columbia Screener, as well as access to local mental health providers. In addition, we've also continued our partnership with Family Counseling Services. They provide one-on-one counseling for students across the district, as well as small group counseling for students at both high schools. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paul. Board, do you have any questions on regards to the presentation?
I just have one. I like that you're working with our student team, and I think that that's great, and I'm happy to hear about all of these things. I was wondering about, at the high school level, where we're at in terms of, beyond the, I know that there's a pretty robust suicide prevention and identification portion of our health programs, but how do we address eating disorders in the nutrition curriculum in there? Is that part of the social emotional umbrella for this as well, when we're looking at those aspects of mental health?
We haven't discussed that yet. I would imagine that would be part of the student services team at both high schools. That's definitely a topic I can ask them more about and see how we can best support preventive strategies. It's a great idea. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
I have 4 questions, so sorry, but I'll try and go through them quick. Where is our, and I hate bringing this topic up, but it's where we're at. Where is our rate of suicide compared to national state norms? I'll start with that question. I'll start with the heavy one.
Okay. Thanks for your question. I can tell you that according to the CDC, students ages 10 through 24, there are 10.5 per 100,000 student deaths in regards to suicide, which is actually lower than any other age group comparatively. We are doing some things, as you heard me mention earlier, with signs of suicide, 6th and 8th grade as well as 9th grade, to provide exposure to our students to prevention things that they can be doing and following up immediately given how they respond to a risk assessment using the Columbia Screener that I mentioned before. We also have as a district something called Illinois Safe to Help, a way for students or community to self-report or report if they're concerned about a peer that's making some concerning statements, as well as Securely, which is something that monitors students' kind of like access on our Chrome system for Google and sends reports immediately to the administration as well as us at the district level to respond immediately to a student in need.
And what about our risk of harms compared to national state norms?
Yep, another great question. So we have, since August, had 250 Columbia screeners completed. We know that a third of these responses are in the high-risk category, which means the students are recommended for immediate treatment or evaluation. But we have also looked at the trend data, and that is comparable from year to year. So the last 3 years, we've kind of held steady at that a third of the students having a high risk. Some of those students are needing additional support year after year, which might flag them into that 1/3 category.
A third of the 250.
Yes.
Just-
Yes.
Where is our support staff in terms of numbers and needs for the social emotional needs of our students? Where are we at with staffing and support staff?
Yep, great question. So we have already conducted 2 adult SEL surveys, one in August and one in December. In the December adult SEL survey, we asked staff to identify who they were and also to indicate if they would like a building administrator to follow up with them on their social emotional learning needs. That was really powerful, and having the leaders come back and say, oh my gosh, I didn't know that that person actually had some areas that they needed some support with. Our leaders were just, thanks to the HR department, informed this past month about First Step Health, which allows for that one-on-one virtual counseling for free of charge for staff, and that has been recommended to staff as needed, as well as the EAP program, which also provides additional assistance to staff who might need it as well.
My last question, then I'll yield the floor here. And this, our student ambassadors, certainly if they want to weigh in, I'm not putting them on the spot, but if you want to weigh in, you can, but you don't have to. But are the students calling for more social, emotional support? Do we have student voice indicating they're calling for this also?
Yes. I don't know if you guys want to respond. I know I spoke to one of you already. I'm going to go ahead and respond.
Okay, yeah. So I'm a Panther leader, which is like in the freshman seminar. So I see freshmen every day during 4th period, and I see a lot of social emotional learning with the freshmen. And although I don't have a guided study, and I've never had a guided study, which is like the study hall on the other side of your lunch, I haven't seen social emotional learning in grades other than freshmen, which I know like freshman year you said you focused on, but I think that if we can reach more than just a freshman, although freshman year can be overwhelming, it can be overwhelming for everyone. So if the education of social emotional learning gets to everyone, that would be helpful.
I guess like the first question, this might seem silly because you might have mentioned it, but just to clarify, you said you were working with some certain student groups to get some insight. Do you have any like specific examples of what kinds of student groups you're working with?
Yes, so I have worked with, I hope I don't mess up the names, Hate Free at OE. I'm meeting with True Colors tomorrow. I'm meeting with the student athletes called SALT, I believe, at OE on Wednesday, specifically at the high school, also the ISA, MSA, also meeting with students that are, and I got these recommendations from high school principals, as well as Dan Arson, the executive director, share about SEL from a high school perspective.
I guess I just kind of add that because I knew about ISA and Hate Free at OE because I'm an OE student, so that was exciting. So
feels that we're really struggling in that area. Not us in general, like Oswego alone. I think it's across the country, right? And so what I would really love to see, and I wouldn't even know where to begin, but what I do believe is there is a direct tie to student outcome, right? So how do we take all of the endeavors that we are undertaking and somehow, I don't know if it's been done yet, Faith, Dr. Kincaid, you'd have to weigh in, but how are we moving the needle? How are we showing that the things that we are choosing to put our time, which is money, and then our actual financials against is actually moving the needle? We had a teaching and learning committee meeting recently, and while there are some definite bright spots in some of our assessments, you know, we're lagging behind and struggling. And I think post-pandemic, if there is such a thing, how are the things that we are doing hitting our targets we want to do? And I'd really like to see that. This is like all the tactical stuff, right? This is what we did. Now, how do we juxtapose that to assessments, to social emotional health, which our student ambassadors have really taught me a lot over the last couple of years, which is some students don't feel good if they're not doing well in certain classes, and other students are like, if I get a C, like I'm doing great. And then social emotional health is, am I getting along with my friends today, or are my friends fighting, or there's so many, do I have a safe adult at my school, and so forth. So I would love to see this like Oswego formula equals this plus this plus this plus this. What are those components that we in Oswego put into our social emotional health quotient, if you will? And I see a lot of the tactical stuff, but how do we start to tie those to things? So I strongly believe in it. I don't, there's lots of conspiracy theories out there. I believe so strongly in teaching our students how to deal with a bad grade, or how to deal with when they get in a fight with a friend, or because when that happens, they're not learning. And then we see that in the assessments, right? So that's all important, but there's so many other components of that social emotional health. And then how do we build that formula so we can start seeing those outcomes? I would love if we could put a little bit of focus on that.
So I had a question around restorative practices. So I'm looking here and it says district leadership team is trained in restorative practices for educators and begins to develop a multi-year implementation plan. So I get it that, as the head goes, so goes the body. So you have to train leadership first. And now you're moving to having discussions regarding a multi-year restorative practice implementation plan for leaders and staff has started, and training is scheduled for second semester. So the question is, I know we have restorative practice practitioners in some of our buildings. How does that tie into what you're doing, and how do we make this systemic in nature, right? Because that's where we want to be, having restorative practice practitioners in every building. If that's the goal, help me understand. Is that the goal? What are we doing?
Well, thank you for the question. That's something that we've wrestled with as a department as well, and we've actually pulled together a secondary restorative practice group. So the restorative practice practitioners that are actually identified already at 2 of our junior highs and both of our high schools. Myself and Mr. Bell facilitate that conversation along with several administrators, actually administrators from every building. And we are identifying what we believe to be restorative practices and what that might look like. We're in the process of drafting that for 308 to present to Executive Council coming up. I am recommending to Dr. Kincaid that all of our building leaders complete a restorative practice module through the IPA, the Illinois Principals Association, this year and or over the summer, with cohort conversations after they complete each one, to be able to talk about the things that they're learning, how that relates to their building. And then in the committee work that I'm working on with Mr. Bell and I in this committee of restorative practice educators, which Shadon's a part of, Shannon, Dan, some of our other level directors, to talk about what the implementation plan will look like for next year, but empowering our leaders to help facilitate that work at each of their buildings, because we know we can't do the work alone. It's a collective effort to really empower our leaders, our teachers, and our students to really understand what that looks like so that we can have really restorative and supportive conversations and relationships throughout.
Thank you.
Great. Excuse me. It's a question. It's actually a piggyback on post-incident recovery. There's several instances that I know of recently and over the course of time where not when there's a school-wide incident where something happens and the students have to be supported through that season, but more of an individualized, a student or a subset of students experience some type of trauma, and now they have to be reintegrated back into the school system. I was reading through it and I didn't see anything specifically, but what type of supports do we provide for those students to ensure that they can successfully assimilate? Because before, social emotional health for them may have not been an issue. And now after this trigger, they may not even understand what they're experiencing. And so there could be something that's, proactively, or if there's anything to support them.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it's something that we're continuing to discuss and what that support looks like. I can tell you right now that the student services team identifies with each student what that support looks like. It'll be different for every student. Some of them will need that check-in, check-out with their counselor or trusted adult. Some students will need some additional support outside of school. Some recommendations might need to be made. But it's a really valid point that there sometimes are greater needs that come out of a situation, and it's one that we talk about as a department and how we can best support at the building level to have protocol, process, procedures so that everyone is kind of following that same level of support for all kids.
Got it.
To this situation, we've had some instances over this past semester where we've had to bring in both students, parents, teachers, other adults in the school to help the state so the student feels comfortable with that reentry, either as Dr. mentioned, a check-in, check-out, or a check-in,
So SEL, it'll be like instructional, right? So certain people can educate students on like what kinds of like coping mechanisms or like mental health issues that are prominent like within the age group, things like that.
So we're still developing the plan at the high school level. It'll look a little different than the
Yeah.
K-8 experience.
Yeah.
And we're ready to start those conversations actually coming up next month.
Okay, so with that knowledge, I'm actually kind of nervous to say this because I know SEL is a really big thing, and I think it was like you said, it's going to be different for the high school level, and I know that certain practices help for like slightly younger kids. And I'm simply saying this from like the perspective of other students I know who have more experience with SEL than I do, and it's kind of more of what I've heard. SEL, like instructionally, isn't effective for a lot of students. And I would say that most students either don't want to receive it or can't receive it just with the capacities, attention span, or just general interest, things like that. Because of the fact that it's provided in kind of like a learning fashion. And of course, like learning is great. Learning is so important. But when we're talking about things that aren't, necessarily like math or English, and it's more about your personhood and how you kind of deal with that as you grow older, having it taught to you doesn't feel as realistic. So I'll just bring in an example. In my film class, every morning we do like a journal, and she mixes in really personal questions about yourself, and she doesn't read them, but she mixes in really personal questions with like really funny questions every morning. So one would be like a would you rather, and the next one will be like make a goal for yourself about something you don't feel very confident about. And it's like, in the beginning, I kind of like had been raised on this ideology that SEL is like very like instructional. So I didn't really see that as a type of SEL. And now it's like, it's crucial to my day. Like I love it. I feel like I've become like actually a better person out of that. And I've realized now that it's a kind of SEL. I'm learning about myself by myself, but with the guidance of someone else rather than it being taught to me. So maybe especially for students that aren't able to be as receptive to just straight like learning from it, allowing them to grow on their own might be a bit more helpful. But I know you're working on that. I just wanted to give that insight as those conversations are coming up.
I just wanted to add on a little bit to what Anya said. So I think that SEL is so specific to each person, which I know we've all kind of touched on. And that each person's needs are different, and so when you have a one set curriculum for students to learn, that doesn't really go through their heads, because you may say that this is what you need to do if you need to cope with something, cope with a problem, but that's not going to work for every student. And when you're not displaying that, I think, and as Anya mentioned, if you're not displaying that through the environments you can create, then students aren't going to receive that in the way that you want them to. In our freshman seminars, we've kind of strayed away from the PowerPoints that we're given, and we either create our own with maybe coping skills that we have experienced and used in our high school careers, as well as we've done a lot of discussion-based things. And we've really created an environment where students feel safe to talk about maybe the things that they're going through, and then in response, people who have experienced that in maybe a more recent time than some of the adults, that it provides a space where we can connect and create new solutions for the problems that we're going through.
Thank you. And Caitlin, you deliver also that social emotional health component in so many ways. I just learned of a new one tonight with the freshmen, but also you do it through Bionic and Talk and so forth. And it's such a crucial part of, everybody knows I'm a huge ambassador for that program, and but it happens so organically there because it's peer-to-peer, and it's something that it's easier to learn in that way than it is to have a teacher instructing on it or so forth. So.
And one thing, real quick, what both of you have said has really struck me, because I know, and I don't think we have this class here in our district, but I teach American Studies, and so it's actually English and U.S. history combined into one. And it's interesting to me because what you're saying really speaks to me, because I try and hide a lot of these components, if you will, inside the instruction, because I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I actually enjoy when people correct me, but I think it's almost gets to a point where it's gimmicky for students if they know you're coming at them, right? And it's almost like you hide things. And I've had students come up to me and say, "Oh, it's just kind of different, Mr. Ploger. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like I can talk about these things." And I'm kind of just like, I just kind of smile and nod, right? And then I think it's almost like, but if I really told you what I was doing, it would almost be like, "Oh no, don't do that," right? It's almost like gimmicky, right?
Yeah, because you can't like learn about how to take care of yourself, right? Like it makes sense, like conceptually, like if you teach someone how to cope, like they're gonna cope. But it's like, if for some reason it doesn't work, right? If you kind of just let it like organically happen, like you mentioned, right? It just kind of, it feels really natural. Like I feel really proud of like the progress I've made in the journal, when in reality, my film teacher probably knew that I was gonna improve on those things anyway, because of the fact that like we're people, we get better. But she really like kick-started that with a little journal thing, you know? And it was hidden, and I was like, this isn't gonna go well, and it went great. I've never had something ingrained into a class like that before, and it was like super awesome.
Although I will say I do answer, and although I'm discouraged sometimes when I do answer, and then my students are surprised when I answer, and I'm like, well, you wrote. The least I can do is respond, right? But I also, one other thing that I really love that you've said here, which is that don't just include the freshmen. Having the teacher, being a teacher of seniors, it is amazing how many seniors I have who have quite a bit of anxiety. Listen, I get it. They're excited to get out of here, right? Like, let's be honest, right? But there is that component of anxiety because you're changing. Like, this is a huge change, and it's a massive change, and you're not coming back, right? And so there are those components in there. And again, I think, again, don't be gimmicky, right? Because if you go up and say, "Oh, please, how can I help?" then that's not going to work, right? But I think there is that piece where if you can make those connections, I think those connections still matter, right? Sorry, I'm not trying to just have a conversation with them. But if those connections I think still matter, right? And if they can be had, I think those students still need that anxiety level lowered as well. So I appreciate that because I really connected to a lot of what you said.
Have we included any of the student piece as we create new curriculum?
So you mean for the high school?
Yeah.
So actually what they both said already, the student ambassadors, is actually the same as what the high school students are reporting overall. And you're right on target. Environment is key. It needs to be organic, like we're mentioning. It needs to happen naturally. But we need to provide that literacy for our staff to understand understand what it is and how to do that, and that professional development will come. Because I'm very cognizant of the student voice that's being shared right now, and it's very valid.
Right, and I 100% agree, but I think what's missing in professional development across the board is student voice.
I agree.
Amen.
So I think it's worth a student institute day when you're signing up for things that you didn't maybe want to go to sit down with a bunch of kids and have the conversation and work something out of it, some kind of curriculum, and then my only other question was, Ms. Trager comes all the time. And I have to ask, and she's right, as we start looking at stuff like this, what else are we addressing or not addressing?
In regards to SEL or?
Well, I mean, SEL I think FASD fits in there somewhere.
So we continue to collaborate with other departments at the district level and also at the building level, from our special education department to teaching and learning to student services, and find ways we can integrate the things that we're talking about on a larger scale and being really targeted and intentional. I took some good notes on what I heard even tonight about, even proactively, how can we prepare students for what might be, coming down the way as far as like safety drills and whatnot. So it's good feedback for me. This is my first board meeting being here in person. So
you did great.
You did awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I just want to say 10-year-olds know it's gimmicky too, because my son always comes home when they we talked about emotions today. So they see through it too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both.
That's great.
All right, item 7.1 is my superintendent report. So good evening, board. On Thursday, January 19th, we held our third meeting of the Community Advisory Committee. Each of the items we discussed at our meeting were submitted by the committee members. We had 3 items on the agenda. The first one was in regards to communications, specifically how we communicate with community, family, staff, and students. I asked the group to be thinking about how well we communicate, the different modalities that we communicate across the community, as well as what ideas people may have had to improve our communications to our stakeholders. And Mrs. Comitas presented and answered many questions during that presentation. Our second agenda item was in regards to community partnerships. Mrs. Comitas and Mr. Miller talked about the many partnerships we have with the school district and within the community, and how both are mutually beneficial. And then our third item was in regards to talking about curriculum timeline and renewals and the process that we go through with this. And Mrs. Dahlquist presented and answered questions from the agenda on that day. My second item is, at our last board meeting, I talked about the transportation updates that we made over winter break to address some of the issues that we were seeing first semester. I had stated that we are currently monitoring ridership and route times. Mr. DeArmond provided us some information from the first week and the second week from after break. In regards to those ridership numbers, principals are also sharing information with us as they are seeing different issues, and transportation is making those appropriate evaluations and those changes as we're moving forward. Well, they're doing the best we can under the circumstances that we find ourselves in, still with the driver shortage. And finally, I just wanted to highlight one athletic achievement that was brought to my attention, and then I also read about in the paper last week, which was very exciting with the OHS girls bowling team. Winnie Breedlove from OHS bowled a perfect game in the final game of a conference dual meet against Romeoville. And what's very impressive is to go with that perfect game, her overall series was an 806, which included the games of 269, 237, and 300, which is the 5th highest individual 3-game series ever thrown in the state of Illinois. So that was quite a record that she broke, and she put herself into those kind of Hall of Fame there. So big congratulations, Delaney. And those are my 3 items that I wanted to report out on this evening. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sparlin. We were thinking we would move our 7.5 student ambassador report up, just in case you guys needed to get home. You want to start?
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry to spring that on you like that.
Okay. So last week we had the pleasure of introducing the new people in the SSAC into our meetings, and it was really great to hear all the voices and their opinions. Anya and I were just talking after that meeting, and we're really excited to see how far we go this year, because the discussions we had during that meeting were already so wonderful. We engaged a lot in discussions and emphasized the purpose of our committee, which is to amplify student voice, provide avenues for students to use their voice, and to strengthen that two-way communication between the Board of Education, faculty, and other students.
Yeah. The Student Advisory Committee also had the wonderful opportunity to work with Ms. Dahlquist, Mr. Gatewood, and Dr. Sparlin for the mission statement that's currently a work in progress. With Ms. Dahlquist's guidance, we engaged in group discussions on certain verbiage within that mission statement that reflect not only the goals of our district, but what our students seek in the district. Invariably, we decided on the word motivate after a lot of discussion, because we thought that it emblazoned that desire of our district to help students not only better themselves, but encourage them to pursue their goals as best as they can in the capacities that they can. It's a positive way to show that our students want preparation for our futures with the assistance of this district so that one day they could go out into the real world on their own and succeed in the ways they desire to. So I think we learned a lot about not only our committee members, but also what this new committee will be capable of with this discussion. So that was very exciting, and we thank you so much for the opportunity to let us engage in that discussion.
Very good. I'm going to pass this down so you can see this. Your pictures are in the ISB Journal. So our students were a part of a presentation that took place at the III conference. Our district is one that other districts want to model their student voice initiatives after, and so we've been asked to participate at another event in May. If you all don't know about that yet, but I'm telling you now. So we're going to start to get more and more invitations to go more and more places to talk about our initiatives in student voice. So.
The way they spoke was.
I know, it was amazing. You all were amazing.
Yes. Thank you for that opportunity. That's so exciting.
Yeah, and I think Dr. Waller will be, communicating with the group. She'll probably bring it to your next meeting.
Yeah, and I know that we're going to be talking with possibly some other districts about promoting student ambassadors and student voice in said districts and in said schools. So that's been really exciting. I guess, on that note, thank you all again for kind of putting this into a spotlight, I guess, the idea that student voice is so important in our district, because when Dr. Sparlin told me, maybe other districts would want to try this and get some insight from you guys on that, I don't know, it feels like it's really coming to life, because if students are, one of the biggest parts of a district, it's really nice to see that other districts are starting to see that as well in the way that our district is working to achieve that. So thank you all so much.
I appreciate you saying that, because when we talked at our first meeting last year, we talked about vision, right? And that was one of the things in the vision was to be a model across the state. And not only have you presented, to the school boards in November, but now we also have other school districts calling us, wanting to have conversation, other students of other school districts having conversations with our students on what we're doing. So really is very exciting. So congratulations.
It truly was the buzz at the conference. I have a question. The other things you talked about with what you wanted to accomplish as student ambassador, and I know Caitlin, this question might be a little bit more for Anya, but was building a bridge between administration and students. How do you feel that, obviously with Dr. Sparlin and with Dr. Waller, obviously Mr. Gatewood, but even beyond the people that you work with day to day, are you seeing that needle move?
I'm hoping to see it move. I know we had that with the surveys last year, and this year, because of the fact that it's the second year in a row that it's happening, I've already had more people, even people I don't know, come up to me and talk to me about that. With the fact that we've been focusing on advancing the types of voices in our committee and how we're working on current mental health issues, I do know that that's not been one of the biggest things that we've tackled this year, but it's one of the biggest aspects of why we made the committee. So I think we're actually moving towards that by having a bigger committee now. I think we can broaden our outreach a lot more. I think we can start setting up different ways to have students come to us to speak out on the things that they care about. Because when we administered the surveys, it's the people who wanted to take the surveys that were able to take it. And a big part of this committee is going out to the people that maybe don't know that they have every right to come forward and speak about their experiences as well. So I think indirectly, yes, I think I have seen that needle move, whether it be people coming up to me or just the opportunities that we have now to help that needle move with a bigger committee.
So. I encourage you, because I truly believe relationships will help our positively affect our student outcomes. And I think those relationships between our educators and our students, the more we bridge that gap and show that it's not such a big expanse. So I look forward to hearing more about that.
Thank you.
Yes, because it's not that what people are looking at and looking for is not just anecdotal information, but they are looking for evidence-based information, which YPAR and the foundation that you guys are using is helping immensely, because when you call us to action, you're calling us to action because you have evidence that something there's an issue and that there's a solution to it. And it's up to us, it's our responsibility to take the action. It's your responsibility just to bring us the information.
And we'll definitely be doing that at our coming meetings now that we've all gotten comfortable with the new committee, and we definitely have some goals outlined for mental health and subtopics for that. So hopefully we'll be seeing that quite soon.
Okay?
Yes.
And don't forget the red velvet cake in the.
I will not, trust me. I will not.
All
Thank
right,
you.
we're
Thank
gonna
you.
move on to 7.2, board committee reports. So we're gonna have a conversation board, even though, you know, like we say that this is we meet in the public, but it's a meeting. How do you say it, Dr. Sprouling? It's a public, it's not a public meeting,
Right.
but it's a meeting done in the public.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And so let's talk about our committee reports, because one of the things that we have been saying for many months is that we wanted to shorten as much as we can our meetings so that our community can get on with their evening. And we wanted to make sure that whatever suggestions that were on the table and available to us, that we would consider them. And so in December, I sent you, there was an email sent out from Ursula, and it outlined a suggestion, which was in order to avoid redundancy in our conversations, and then also to document for our community and for our board the committee reports, we were asking that when you go to your meeting, that you would, when you go to your meeting, that you would ask a couple of questions. I don't remember exactly what the questions were. There's an email that was just recently sent to you. I'll just pull one out right now.
It was what was discussed.
Yes.
What actions did you take?
Yep.
What are the next steps?
Right,
steps.
and that before you left every meeting, that you would ask those 3 questions, and then you would forward that information on to Ursula, so that when board docs comes out, you would be able to read that, and when we come to the meeting, the only question I'll be asking of you is, are there any questions? So that's the kind of way, that's how we want to go forward, which will help in many ways to shorten that portion of our meeting. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, obviously, I brought up the issue today. One of the concerns that I have is that, especially regarding policy, is that our role as a board is to set policy. And if we are not actively discussing it, then I'm not sure we're doing our due diligence. Now, with that being said, we have a very heavy lift coming up because we just got the draft of our new policy manual, which is massive. And we are chunking it as a committee and taking on different parts of it. We will have action items, we'll have information items and then action items. But this committee has put a ton of work into it. And so it's incredibly important to highlight for our community, for our constituents, when we're changing or making or addressing policy, we need to really, that needs to have the floor here because it's one of the main things of what we do. So that was what I really wanted to have this discussion to let the community know that we are changing how we do it. But I also am a big believer in pre-work and putting all of those documents online for everybody to read and see. But I do believe that with regards to policy specifically, we're going to have some, especially soon, some meetings coming up where we're going to have some pretty robust conversations. Dr. Kincaid will tell you, Allie will tell you that having IASB do this workshop with us, there's a lot of things we missed. There's a lot of things we needed to address, and it's going to be really important for everybody to see what those things are. So that was where I really wanted to address this from a board issue. And regarding teaching and learning.
Can I address that before you go to
Yes,
teaching
of
and learning?
course.
So I think that so what was happening in the past is that the board committee report, we would talk about all of those changes, and then the same thing that we had would come up in information, sometimes in the same meeting, and then we would have the discussion again. So I agree with you. We absolutely have to have the conversation, but we don't have to have the conversation in both places. We
I
can
totally
we can have
agree.
the conversation
In
when
information.
in information as opposed to going over it, especially if it's within the same meeting. And we're of course not saying don't bring it up, because there's I think the committee report can give context to it, to the decisions that were being made, but we may not have to walk through every single one if we're, especially in when we're going to do it in information as well.
My concern is that while I enjoy the change that we're doing with the committees, I want to make sure that we remain sensitive to the fact that we made changes and not everyone in the community agreed with those changes, and I don't want their voices to get lost. And so if we're now saying we're only going to talk about I just want to make sure we're sensitive and cognizant of the changes that we've made this year are a lot. And so we don't throw anything or push anything under the rug, and that we have this discussion in open versus
Absolutely.
behind the scenes.
Yeah, the goal.
Can I interject that real quick to back that up? So, I mean, I obviously I voted against the change, right? So, I mean, just being transparent. And so I'm fine with the change except for one small problem I have with it. And that is that we have actually had quite a bit of community members show up to these meetings and make comments. And one of the things I don't want lost in all of this is their voice. So I want our community voice to still be a part of that. And so one of the things that I brought in when we report out from our committee is, hey, these are the issues that our community members brought into that meeting, and I don't want that voice lost. So
I feel like we haven't.
and I'm not saying anyone's suggesting that. That's not accusatory. I'm just making sure and reiterating that piece doesn't get lost, and I want to make sure that our community knows that they're going to show up, they're going to voice that,
Absolutely.
and that piece will continue. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And I feel like we haven't heard a lot as much about what goes on in the community advisory committee, so I would love to hear a little bit more of that. And then with regards to teaching and learning, like especially our last meeting when we reviewed data, those student outcomes are why we're all sitting here. And so I struggle with how much I think it's really important to talk about that stuff as a committee so everybody knows what is happening with our student outcomes. So
Can that data be put into
oh yeah,
your...
we can't go over that data in a meeting, yeah, and we can pre-work it, but we have to let the community know where that stuff is going to be, so they know. As much as I would love the entire community to be watching the board meetings and be fully engaged, we know that nobody can really put that much time into a board meeting. So I just want to make sure everybody knows where that stuff is shifting to.
Yeah, and I think for the sake of transparency, one of the reasons that we were discussing is that this actually documents it, versus before it would be a comment which someone would have to go back and listen to whatever we were saying, because it's by no means is it trying to remove the voice. It's actually trying to document the voice so that you can even see it.
No, I agree. That was you stole my point. That's actually, I mean, it does increase transparency, and it does not limit discussion. Jen and I had a little bit of back and forth, which was maybe something to consider. The administrators are leading these meetings, and they have they might be the best suited to deliver a summary that is actually documented on, the documentation part.
Yes, the documentation part. What I'm hoping to avoid is a lot of us just don't have bandwidth today to scramble for updates and everything, and so it's not fair to Ursula to be like chasing board members and stuff. So I talked to Mrs. Dahlquist today and Dominic, and we really need to build into the agendas moving forward the last 15 minutes of committee meetings to write those so that Ursula doesn't have to chase people. And honestly, we were both in meetings today, texting back and forth, trying to get something done. We don't have capacity for more of that work. So.
Yeah, I mean, basically what happened is, there was a Tuesday night meeting. I had another Tuesday night meeting for the district, and then Wednesday I had work, and not a school district meeting, and Thursday I had a district meeting, and work. So I mean,
So, yeah.
it was just that was very.
Yeah, I think at the
and the
end
whole
of
time I
every
was thinking
meeting-
about trying to get this done.
Sure, I know you were, and I thank you, and I appreciate that. So at the end of every meeting with the administrator present, these 3 questions are going to be answered and asked and answered, and then just push it on out to Ursula, and then she'll get it in board docs. I think we're good, and then obviously, we're going to have the conversations and information a lot of times, or, and then how do we communicate this out? Like, so Teresa, is there something that we could put somewhere to let our community know that, we're doing, where they can find the information?
Yeah, so we already have the meeting summaries that get prepared after each meeting, so I can just include a link there to the full write-ups of each of those by meeting date.
That's great.
Yep.
And then Ursula, you are already on that document, right? So as we update it weekly, and then we'll just add Teresa to it, and then everybody has access to it. Perfect.
Very good. Now, would you guys like to give your teaching and learning report?
Sure, it's going to be short and sweet.
Very good.
So we did an in-depth review of the winter FastBridge data. We are cautiously optimistic about the shrinking gender gap between boys and girls, possibly due to the literacy framework. And that is a very general overview. In some grade levels, we don't see that gap closing as fast. So that's a very general overview. Faith, is the community going to have access to the data?
We can make that as part of the minutes that we always put out. We use the
Perfect.
handouts and put those out in the minutes.
Perfect. Administration will continue to work with the schools where that gap exists and is growing or is still larger than we'd like it to be. As well, they are also exploring successes that other schools are experiencing to see how we can apply it across the district. We are seeing less gains in the upper grades where there are fewer interventionists and less differentiation for high achieving students. And we will continue to seek ways to improve Tier 1, especially for those higher students. And as a board, I ask you, as I'm sure the administration will agree, and I don't know if Mrs. Jones left, but I know she would agree as well, to support interventionists with our budget. This was the first year that FastBridge was given to all 9th graders. Is that correct? And Mrs. Dahlquist highlighted why it's critical to address any trends or gaps we see and close them before we get to the higher grades, because it is much more challenging to close those grades in the upper school. I inquired about the use of phonics as a teaching method at the elementary level, as there are some false narratives that sometimes that I have heard that, and frankly, I was wondering that we don't utilize phonics instruction. Dr. Harmon was at our meeting this week, which was great to hear her. And she shared that phonics is actually embedded in all of our instruction, and that it is not meant to replace any read aloud or comprehensive strategies, but that is actually a complementary to all of that, but that in fact we do have it embedded in all of our instruction.
The only other thing I would add is we went over the math, and that was particularly for junior high. We had a new curriculum. The expectation was you would see a decrease in performance with the new curriculum. Initially, this bucked the trend. We're seeing an increase in math kind of right away. So that was interesting.
Well, and we also know that after the curriculum review last year, I know I struggled with it. It's a lot of money to invest, but it is a different way of math instruction, lots of word problems. And
yeah, we talked about that.
It's going to take some time for that to click. I don't know what the right word is, but there needs to be a lot of professional development for the teachers to understand how to teach it and so forth. But from what I gather, Faith, please jump in here. We do see that there's kind of some short-term frustration, but long-term gains and benefits that will come from that. And so it is tough at the beginning to deal with. We don't ever want to see those results, but that we do believe that there is something better on the horizon.
Frustrations from the teachers or from the student perspective?
Well, maybe both.
I'd say yes to both of those as you try something new. And then we also knew as we piloted those materials, because you haven't increased the challenge incrementally through those to then switch as 8th grade when the curriculum that we purchased was assuming that 6th grade and 7th grade was also on those pieces. So you make a jump to higher skills when you haven't had the scaffolding of the grade levels before that. And then any time that you try a brand new tool, there is some learning and some pieces from both staff, administration, students, before you get into the rhythm of these are the parts that I really like. Now I understand how to use the technology pieces with that. So some of it is growth and adjustment to a new tool.
And I'm glad you bring this up about FastBridge and so forth. I was fortunate. I was going to wait till board member comments on this piece, but I'll bring it up now since this came up. I was fortunate enough to be invited to one of Boulder Hill's staff meetings since our last board meeting, and it was interesting because FastBridge came up, and I listened to a very professional and a very I don't want to say intense in a negative way, but the teachers were very invested. That's what I wanted. Invested conversation about their data. And what was interesting to me is they definitely feel outside pressures when it comes to their data. And I think it's important for everybody to understand up here and all stakeholders to understand that, yes, obviously we want high standards and we want growth, obviously. But we need to understand that some of these programs look differently and some of our schools look differently, and students are entering different at different levels. And so some of our programs will see that aggressive growth actually in those later elementary grade levels based off of the program, and some of them we will see our aggressive growth earlier. And we need to understand that we have different programs in this district, we have diverse schools in this district, and so we can't just always sit here and look and say, what about this school as opposed to this school, without having that holistic conversation. And that's important, I think, when we're coming to the table and we set the tone. And I hope all stakeholders realize that as well. I'm always happy when people are educating themselves on everything that's going on, and I hope that continues, but that means having the whole picture. And you know this, if anyone who's gone to any of these schools, whether it be Long Beach or Boulder Hill, and myself having experience at Long Beach and also at Hunt Club, loved both of those experiences. But they are different schools, and that's what makes our district great, is having that diversity. But they do feel those pressures, and they see it, and I saw that come out.
Question: you said outside pressures. Can you define that for me?
Us.
Oh God, the board.
Us. Yeah.
Outside of
I
that
literally
building.
asked. I literally asked. I said, you do know that we do understand that we know that certain programs we will see aggressive growth in 4th and 5th grade, right? And the answer was they don't know that everybody understands that. But it's not just us, the community also. The community as well. They hear things, right? They feel it. And I think everybody in education hears and feels things right now. But I'll just say it also, like there's administration also, and I said, and I will say, I said, well, I don't think that's everybody. I think that we understand we have diverse schools. Yes, we expect growth. We expect results. I'm not saying that that's not the case, right? And we expect on our side to give you the tools that you need. I myself am disappointed sometimes in the fact that we cannot give all the tools that they need. And I am somebody who will absolutely put myself out there, I don't care, and point out that those tools aren't being provided, because it's a two-way street. It's an open conversation, and it needs to be a holistic conversation, and it needs to be an honest conversation. And but thank you for asking that, because yeah, those are the pressures they feel.
Thank you.
One of the things that's very hard about presenting teaching and learning in an update is that the results are so nuanced. It is not just about decreasing the gap between genders. It is not just about decreasing the gap between Black and white students. It is not about just decreasing the gaps, the academic gaps between grade levels. It is schools and teachers and administrations and what's going on in the world. We had 2 schools that had interruptions. I mean, there's so much about it. And so what is very hard, and I think Dominic and I probably questioned Faith and Dr. Harmon and also Mrs. Luters and Dan Artson were there as well, was, okay, but what are you doing about elementary math in grade 4, because this is happening? And then, wait a second, but what, our Black students have declined since fall grade 3 in this school and this school, and it's really hard to change at an organizational level without the finances behind it. So when we talk about very real decisions that we make, and what we choose to spend our money on and not choose to spend our money on, this is what we're really here for. Yeah. So we're not here for a parking lot as much as we all would love to put one in. This is what we're here for. And when you look at these results, it's hard not to say we better be throwing a lot of money at this, right? Because we need to meet our students' needs. So while the update is, there are some positives, there's also some worries too, some things that we didn't expect to see. So I encourage everybody to go look at those and understand that at the end of the day, when we make financial decisions, it's to change these results.
Can you disaggregate the data to each school level? And is there a school improvement plan? Is this information included in their school improvement plan? Okay.
Yes, and we go through and look at by grade level and by school, and then you might have been referencing me when you were talking about, because I did email all of our elementary principals detailed things of, here's grade level that looks really great, can you identify why it's the outlier? Or, ooh, I looked at this and I had questions, do you know what you're wanting to do to improve? Because one of the things that you want to do is identify celebrations and have it spread, as well as get in and dig into the data. And could be that there was a teacher out for a long time on a leave. It could have been, and getting into all of those pieces. And what we're really excited about with the data this year is we're beginning to have trend data. And trend data is really when you can identify, here are the systemic things that are working and how do we push that out there. But it comes through not by the aggregate, by looking into all the different grade levels, even different demographic groups, and then how does that tie into school improvement plans? They're watching their FastBridge data. They have data dives at the elementary schools after the fall benchmarking, and again about halfway through, and then after the winter benchmarking and halfway. So processes in place to have grade levels as well as the school improvement team dive into that data and ask those questions, probably like what you just saw.
But I do want to stress and reiterate, very invested, to say the least. I was very impressed with how invested our teachers are over there in their students.
Okay, moving on, 7.3, board member comments. Does anyone have any?
I actually do, and I'm
okay.
sorry, yeah. I know you know the answers to these, Dr. Sparlin, but hopefully, and again, it's just an opportunity so that I can, because I've been fielding this, so you can help me put this to rest, right? Which is, do we need, and I'll just give them to you all at once, because I know you know they're coming. Do we need to adjust anything due to the primary election here in Oswego? Is Oswego East and other locations prepared to deal with the added traffic and where to direct people? Is there any added expense to us? Any disruption to our students? And I actually did some work on the last one, which is there any place outside Chicago and Oswego dealing with this? I think there are, actually, although I did read that Kankakee is not having a primary election for the first time in 29 years. But I'll let you take that over just because I've had that question come in, and so I said I would ask it and get a definitive answer for anyone who was wondering.
The answer is no, yes, no, no.
Thank you, the end.
You're most welcome. No, we did speak with the regional superintendent, who in turn spoke with Illinois State Board of Education in regards to having students in session or in attendance when we're going with the primaries. There's no additional expenses. We did inquire with the county clerk to ask, could we, is there alternate sites that could be used? The answer was no. They will provide a police officer at each one of the locations. Parking's been identified. Internal, external, entrance and exit to one area, one room of the school. It'd be cordoned off. They'll provide signage and things like that for parking. And there won't be any additional costs.
All right.
I have one. So as we talk about girls doing cool things, so OHS, and clearly we had conference for wrestling. We had 11 placers at OHS, and we had 8 at OE, which is a lot for OE. They've come a long way. And then we also had our first girl. What? Placers? Top 8. Okay. We had a lot more top 3, top 4, but I don't want to single anybody out. But we did have 3 girls place, for the first time ever. Yeah. So 1 at OH and 2 at OE. So it was kind of a big deal.
It's impressive.
Yeah. Do they have to wear those uniforms as well?
They're called a singlet. And they have special ones to keep their...
Good.
Yeah.
Very good.
That's awesome.
Their things together.
Yes. All right, 7.4. Ms. Comitas is going to give us an update on our communications and our promise to get back to you about opportunities to provide feedback and input regarding the search process.
Yes. So on the district's homepage now, there is a link to a superintendent page, Superintendent Search 2023 page. This page is intended to serve as kind of a gathering site for milestones as the search continues. There is an area for frequently asked questions. There's a few placed there already. There's kind of our milestone timelines, different pieces that'll happen from the announcement of Dr. Sparlin's retirement, the RFP's proposal review, the different steps that go along with this search. There's also a catalog there of any news or publications that have gone out that were related to the superintendent search. We'll continue to add to that. And then there's also a link there to questions. So if there's any specific questions regarding the process of searching and hiring the superintendent, there's a form there that can be completed, and we'll route those questions appropriately through President Simulton to get those answers back to the community. This is just kind of the initial outline sketch of what this page looks like. We did some comparison with what other districts have included, and as we continue to survey stakeholders and with the help of the partner that the board chooses for this search, additional materials will be added here. It is one key component on here to make sure that the public does understand that the board recognizes the importance of the stakeholder input in the selection of this committee. So there will be opportunities, avenues, tools, et cetera, for students, staff, families, and the community to provide input. So it's not asking for you to use that question box right now to give that specific input. There will be very formal opportunities to provide that input. But if you have questions about how that process will roll out or anything, that question box is available there. So are there any questions I can answer in regards to that?
First of all, great job. Fantastic. I know that we have a lot of work to do, obviously, but depending on what firm we go with, they will be conducting interviews but will we be able to pivot this to also just even an informal survey or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever avenues you want to utilize to garner feedback, we certainly can house those here. I know a number of those places use different tools and stuff, so whatever that looks like or wherever you land, absolutely, we can expand on this. It's just kind of like the page we had when we've had the referendums in the past. Just
Yes.
sort of a landing page where we can kind of catalog everything related to this topic. So
This is excellent. I just know that for a lot of families that are working and so forth, they may not be, or they may not get invited to an interview or something, that I just want to make sure as many people can give
Yeah.
us feedback as possible.
Yeah, and in comparison with a lot of the other school districts that have done searches and have sites like this, they do seem to have those types of survey tools available on there for feedback. But again, most of those seem to be originating from the partner chosen to conduct the search.
Yes,
So as soon as
yes.
we have that opportunity to meet with that partner, then we will definitely expand that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes, excellent job. Thank you so much.
you're welcome.
Where it says questions, do you have a question? We're going to get a link.
So
We're
you
gonna get a
you,
link.
you
Yeah,
can
you gotta
now.
click the word
It's
question.
live now, so you can
Oh,
click right on the
okay.
questions
A Google form.
thing there, and then it'll open
Yes.
up a little Google form. They'll come to me initially, and then I'll wrap them up in a nice package and pass them on to you.
Can we turn it blue or something so we
That's
know?
exactly what I was thinking. Red or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, can
Yeah.
we turn it blue just so we?
And
Yep.
the same with the superintendent search
Search
on the
box.
front page. At the bottom, can we have like a button or something?
On the homepage of the website. So there's a superintendent search button. It's right next to the COVID resources, right under the
Oh, on the
slider
Board
that
of
we talk
Education,
about.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, under the Board of Education.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was on that page, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. We just kind of got this live today. It's a work in progress, so
No, it's
absolutely
awesome.
we'll
It's
link some more
awesome.
stuff there for you.
And then you're gonna put this in anything that you blast out on
Yep.
our Facebook page so they know where to do it.
Yep,
Awesome.
absolutely, and we'll
Thank you.
continue to add to it as more things come up and go out.
Great.
Great work.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Excellent. All right, next, 8.1, consent agenda. Are there any questions on the consent agenda? Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
I make a motion to approve all items under consent, including 8.1 minutes from the January 9th, 2023 Board of Education meeting, open and closed session.
Second.
Ms. Doyle? Aye. Ms. Swanson?
Aye.
Mr. Saron?
Aye.
Ms. Simulton?
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Ploger?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. 9.1, action items. Approval of resolution authorizing the issuance of tax anticipation warrants. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the issuance of tax anticipation warrants in anticipation of the collection of taxes levied for the year 2022 by the Board of Education of Community Unit School District 308, Kendall, Kane, and Will Counties, Illinois, for educational purposes.
Second, and I have two questions on this.
Okay.
How much do we need in our reserves in order to not need these?
So we need about that 20%, which is about $52 million.
And how, if you don't know, that's okay, because I didn't, but,
How much do we have now?
yeah,
Yep, we have about 25 million
25.
in reserves, which is where this $20 million figure comes from.
and will we get an update on who buys these?
Yes.
Do you know, if you don't have it, that's okay, do you know timeline approximately, or not?
Yeah, we just reviewed that again with our financial advisor, and we're looking at selling these by the end of February, beginning of March.
Thank you.
I do have one question as well, and I apologize. I'm neurodiverse, so I have to answer a lot of questions a lot of times.
That's all right.
Remember when we over-levied? Okay, so we over-levied, and then can you remind me what is happening with that money?
Yeah, and so what we reported to the county was that we only needed 33 million, but somehow they charged $36 million. So what we did is we levied the full amount, but then they are abating that. So we're, instead of getting 36 million this year, we'll get the 36 million minus the money that
So
should
the
have been abated.
taxpayers will
And it's going
be
back to
made
the
whole.
taxpayers. Yep.
And then secondly, what checks and balances do we have in place for that not to happen again?
Yeah, I'm in the process right now. It's just a matter of every county sends me, like, I turn in a levy sheet, and then they send me a confirmation levy sheet, and I sign off on that and make sure that the numbers I give them, they've entered them properly into their systems, and they give me back that confirmation, and then I sign off on those and give them back to them.
And then,
So-
following through with the, okay, thank you.
And then I measure each county. I make sure that the numbers I'm giving, because it's a levy for the school district, not for each county. I
Right.
make sure the numbers for every county
And
are
working with the
exactly
counties
same.
to make sure that they don't give us the wrong bill. Thank
Correct.
you.
Yep.
Really important, because I know that it was, a lot of us were frustrated with that, and I just want to make sure taxpayers know they'll be made whole.
But clearly, like, somehow we got the right amount to Will and Kane, so.
Yeah. Do I need to read it again?
No, we made a motion.
Mr. Saron,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Ploger,
Aye.
Ms. Swanson,
No.
Ms. Doyle,
Aye.
Ms. Simulton.
Aye. Motion passes 6-1. 9.2 action item, approval of bus trust lease agreement for activity buses. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the 5-year activity bus trust lease agreement with Midwest Transit Equipment, Inc. and Santander Leasing LLC, subject to the school district attorney's review as presented.
Second. Excuse me.
Ms. Doyle,
Aye.
Ms. Swanson,
Aye.
you say no?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Saron,
Aye.
Ms. Simulton,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Ploger.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. 9.3 action item, approval of bus trust lease agreement. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the 5-year bus trust lease agreement for 29 special education vehicles with Midwest Transit Equipment, Inc. and Santander Leasing LLC as presented.
Second.
Ms. Simulton,
Aye.
Ms. Swanson,
Aye.
Mr. Ploger,
Aye.
Ms. Doyle,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Saron,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. 9.4 action item, approval of 2023-2024 school year calendar. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the 2023-2024 school year calendar as presented.
Second.
Mr. Ploger,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson,
No.
Mr. Saron,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Ms. Swanson,
Aye.
Ms. Doyle,
Aye.
Ms. Simulton.
Aye. Motion passes 6-1. 9.5 action item, approval of personnel report. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the personnel report as discussed in closed session.
Second.
Ms. Simulton,
Aye.
Mr. Ploger,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Saron,
Aye.
Ms. Doyle,
Aye.
Ms. Swanson.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. 10.1, can I have a motion to go into closed session?
I make a motion to enter closed session under statute 5 ILCS 120/2C1, the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of certain employees and individuals, 5 ILCS 120/C2, collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedule